Today I'd like to demonstrate one of the new features that was delivered in our 2020.3 release, TotalView Remote User Interface Debugging. For viewers that might be new to TotalView, TotalView is a comprehensive C and C++ and Fortran debugger that has been built from the ground up for debugging multi-process and multi-threaded applications. It works with a variety of technologies that enable this, such as MPI, OpenMP, and other multi-process and multi-threaded applications. If you're building CUDA-based applications to run code on NVIDIA GPUs, TotalView can debug those applications as well. It has a variety of technologies within it, including reverse debugging, memory debugging, Python, C and C++ debugging, and other types of technologies to really allow you to understand what's going on with your application, find issues that are within it, and resolve bugs faster. It works in a variety of Linux architectures, macOS, and Unix architectures as well. So let's review some of the remote debugging technologies that are in TotalView now. So debugging remotely, whether it be on a remote HPC cluster or what as many of us have had to do this past year is work remotely from home, can be a challenge. There's challenges in setting up a secure remote connection, launching and attaching and debugging the target application, and just having a responsive interactive GUI that you can work with. Now, TotalView offers a couple different technologies for doing efficient remote debugging. We have the Remote Display Client, which allows you to easily set up a remote VNC desktop environment. We have TotalView Reverse Connect, which allows you to connect a job that may have been launched into a cluster back to a remote user interface. And then our newest technology, the TotalView Remote UI Debugging, allows you to run the TotalView UI directly on your laptop or remote workstation and launch and set up a remote debugging session. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There are videos that you can watch about how to do TotalView Remote Display Client and TotalView Reverse Connect debugging as well. And you can check out videos for using the RDC and TotalView Reverse Connect at our video course series. You can go to the TotalView Remote video courses at the URL listed at the bottom of this slide. So TotalView Remote UI Debugging allows you to combine the convenience of running the TotalView GUI locally on your laptop or workstation, but yet it's connected to the remote debugging engine that's running on a different system remotely. The front-end GUI is running at full speed with the full power of your laptop, but yet it's using secure communications to communicate with the back end of where the debugger is actually going. And the front end and the back end do not need to be the same. So you could be running the UI on, say, your Mac, and you're connected back to a Linux cluster and doing debugging on that cluster. Sessions can easily be set up so they can be resumed at subsequent times. And this technology also works and supports the TotalView Reverse Connection technology as well. Now, just kind of looking at a high-level architecture diagram. Here we have on the left that we have our remote system. This is where we're running the TotalView user interface. It could be my laptop, and today I'm going to demo this feature on my Mac, and I'm going to connect to a remote Linux machine that is across the country from where I reside. TotalView will communicate to that remote debugger through SSH connections, providing secure connections to that remote system. And depending on how you're doing the debugging in the remote system, that remote system may actually launch other applications that are part of your, say, overall job. If you were launching into a cluster, you're going to leverage the TotalView Remote Debug Server framework and, say, possibly srun from Slurm to launch a series of ranks on compute nodes and establish a full parallel debugging session, again, that you're able to debug all the way from your remote system. So let's actually take a look at a demo here and see how it all comes together. So what I have here is a terminal that is on locally here on my Mac, and I'm based in the East Coast, and I'm going to start TotalView up here on my Mac. So let's do that now. So here's TotalView's interface that's come up on here. Now to configure where we want to run the debugger. And right now we're actually on my Mac. I could debug on my Mac here. We can see that just looking at the command line that we're running on macOS X Darwin. So let's click on the Configure button to launch the remote debugging configuration. And we're going to create a new configuration here. So all that you need to do is give it a name. So I'm just going to call this Microwave 1. And then you give it one or more hosts that you need to SSH through to get to the end point of where you're going to run the debugger. So in my case, I'm just going to SSH to a system that is out in my lab out in Colorado. So I put in my username and the name of the system. Now I have SSH keys set up, so I won't need to do any authentication to go into the system. If you did need to log into it, what would happen is the terminal that we started TotalView from, a prompt would come up there, as you normally would if you were SSHing into the system, and you would enter your password at that point. Now, if you needed to go through, say, a gateway machine to some then internal machine, you could add a second system on here. That would be where you want to end up and actually run TotalView. So you can chain multiple together here by just a comma separated list. I'm just going directly to one machine on here. And then lastly, you have to tell this user interface piece here of TotalView where TotalView resides on the back side on here. So in this case here, I'm just going to put in the full path of where my TotalView installation is there. So let's say OK. And now simply select the configuration of the system you want to connect to. You can see I have several configured on here. And I'm going to select Microwave 1. And it has gone through and done that connection on there. So now we can see that I am on a Linux system. So I'm still running the UI on my Mac. I'm connected to a Linux system now on the back end. And one of the key things on this that you'll see here is that the Mac systems do not allow reverse debugging with our product called Replay Engine. But because now I'm on a Linux system, the user interface has turned on this toolbar that allows me to turn on the reverse debugging if I were going to do that. So the capabilities of the user interface change based on the target system that you're debugging on. So now that I am out on that system, I can start a debugging session out there. So let's go through and do that by just saying I'm going to debug a program. And I can enter in, I'm just going to use my full path to a program named txarrays and load that session. It's loaded up the source file, and I can take a look through that. I can set a breakpoint on that file, begin running. And we can see my local variables over here. I can drag any of the data structures into my data view and do all the debugging and everything right there with it. So I'm locally running my user interface for TotalView, and I am communicating with the debug engine out in my system out in Colorado and doing remote debugging in that fashion. So you can see it was very easy to set that up. The response is very fast on here. I have one of my sales engineers. He's been doing very similar. He's based in the UK though, so he's crossing the Atlantic and then going all the way into Colorado to use our systems there. And he's had very good success with this capability of doing remote debugging. So one more piece I'll show you quickly on here is, so let's restart again on here. I'm going to exit TotalView and we're going to run TotalView again. So let's bring up that interface. So I already have that Microwave 1 configured, so I can just connect to it again. And we can see again, I'm connected on the Linux system, and it will say in the lower right of the status bar that my remote session is on Microwave 1. Now, I'm going to combine the other technology that I mentioned, which is Reverse Connect. So in this other window here, I'm logged into this Microwave 1 system, and I'm going to use the TotalView command tvconnect, and I'm going to run a program called txbasicdata. So when I do that, what tvconnect is going to do is coordinate with that TotalView debug engine and say, there's an incoming debugging connection here. Do you want to accept it? So let's say yes on here. And now, without even having to do anything from my user interface, I've got a full up debugging session here. And I can set a breakpoint again and jump into that and start running and debugging my code. So this workflow of combining the remote UI and tvconnect gives me a lot of flexibility in establishing remote debugging connections. tvconnect You can see here I ran a simple example of just one executable that I wanted to run, but it's also really handy if you're submitting, say, a job to a batch queue. So if you had a Slurm script and within there you're doing an srun or some way of launching your MPI job through Slurm, you can just simply prefix it with TV Connect, and when the job scheduler runs your job, it will then connect with this remote user interface, and you can then do your interactive debugging. Very easy to get that all going and running on there. So this is a quick demo, but I hope you can see the capabilities and power of being able to run the TotalView user interface locally, establish that remote debugging session, and actually do debugging very efficiently from distance. Okay, so we've taken a look at some of the remote debugging capabilities of TotalView and an in-depth demonstration of the new remote UI feature there as well. If you're looking for ways you can learn more about TotalView and examine some of these other videos that I've talked about today, you can check out our video tutorials. You can just go to TotalView.io, and under the resources section you'll see video tutorials. We also have a series of blogs that you can check out, comprehensive documentation. And if you haven't tried TotalView out, check out our free debugging trial and actually try the product on your code. To learn more about TotalView, go to TotalView.io.